to the show. Our next guest has interviewed jihadists, neo-Nazis, and domestic terrorists for her work, exploring some of society's most polarizing points of extremism.
And she's an Emmy, BAFTA, and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker who's also a laureate of the 2023 Global Pluralism Award. She joins us in studio today. Please welcome Deeyah Khan. Welcome to the show. Mel just mentioned in the intro, you have spent hours with some of society's most violent extremists. So I guess the first question is, why do you do what you do?
Good question.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've always been really interested in differences and how can we overcome our differences. And to me, what better way to do that than to go to the very, very far extreme? Because if I can make some progress there, then what we do in our day-to-day life might seem a bit more within reach. Yeah, so it's all a process of learning for me about human behavior.
Perhaps not surprisingly, your life has been threatened by extremists throughout your entire career.
Yeah.
So have you ever been conducting your work and been actually afraid for your well-being or even life?
So, you know, I made a very conscious decision at one point in my life that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being afraid. And I think that's a choice. It's a choice no longer to be afraid. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having said that, there was one instance where, I don't know if you all remember Charlottesville. Do you remember where all the neo-Nazis and white supremacists gathered? So I was there and I managed to film with the neo-Nazis during the marches that they did. That same evening, I was told by one of the guys that I was allowed to come, I could film them, I had permission, and I was like, okay, great, so I can continue exploring and listening to what it is that they have to say, why they're doing some of what they're doing. So we go into the mountains of Virginia, myself and a colleague and this one white supremacist, and before we walk to this compound where they all were, I grabbed the camera and my colleague's like, you know what, just leave the camera. Let's go have a look first and then we can come back and you can grab the camera. I was like, no, but Brian said it's fine. We can let's just go. He said, well, just, you know, relax, just leave it and we can always come back. So we start walking down this winding road and I see this compound at the bottom and I start seeing lots of guys gathering. Some of them are not wearing their shirts. But they've got bruises on their bodies, and some are carrying bottles, and some are carrying weapons that I've seen on like war footage. Mm-hmm. And they start screaming and shouting, "Who the F are you? Put your effing hands up. Who are you? What are you doing here?" And the only thing I had was a mobile phone in my hand. So we're walking with our hands up, myself and my colleague. The guy that was there with us, Brian, he disappears. So it's just myself and my colleague left. Wow. Then one group of them surround my colleague. They separate us. They take me to the other side. And they're just screaming and shouting and yelling. And then I glance down at my phone and it says no signal. Oh. And I hadn't told the TV channel, hadn't told my family, hadn't told my colleagues back in London that I was here. And what's going through my mind is that this is it. I'm gonna die. This is how it's gonna go. And nobody's gonna find me. Mm-hmm. And one guy walks up to me and he blows smoke in my face and he said, "Are you pregnant?" And I was, but I was hiding it because they would all talk about during the day at the march how they wanted to give an abortion to a dark-skinned woman. Ooh. So I just dead in his eyes said, "No, I'm not. I'm not pregnant." Brian finally comes back, negotiates for us to be able to leave. So that's how we were able to leave. So there I was scared. Yes, I was.
Wow. Okay, so Deeyah, you spent countless hours talking to extremists, everything from domestic terrorists to neo-Nazis. Yeah. Is there a common thread amongst those extremists?
You know, so as you said earlier, I've received death threats from all of these various groups. I think what's common is the kind of language that they use, the kind of violence that they believe in, the kind of fear that they all operate from, and how they believe that all the other groups are wrong, they are right, and their vision of the world needs to be the one that needs to be implemented, even with violence.
Yep.
Wow. All right. So several extremists that you've interviewed later rejected these ideologies as a result of their conversation with you. So let's give that a round of applause. That's incredible. But what if we aren't all as willing as you are to show these people empathy?
So, you know, I don't do what I do because I have an expectation or I'm trying to preach to people that this is what you need to do, that you need to go sit with abusers or terrorists or criminals or violent people. The reason I do what I do is to try and show that there are ways that we can reach each other despite the extreme differences that we have. One of the guys that left the neo-Nazi group, he's become a brother to me, and I never would have expected that to happen before. So change is possible, but we have to be willing to reach across our divides. And so, you know, don't apply it to terrorists. You don't have to apply it to terrorists. Apply it to Uncle Bob in your family who has some unpleasant views. Be willing to have a conversation with him.
I mean, we don't have a lot of time left, but it's interesting because a lot of people say what you do is extreme listening with extremists. So when we are struggling to find common ground with someone we disagree with, quickly, what do we do to overcome that barrier?
I think you have to set aside judgment and you have to be curious instead. You have to be willing to be fully present with somebody, and you have to be willing to not give up on people even if they've given up on themselves, and put their dignity at the forefront. Just because they're hateful doesn't mean that you become the same. Otherwise, there's no difference, right?
Big lesson. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you. We want to let everybody know that tomorrow night you're going to be interviewed for a live podcast episode of Abdul Rahman Malik's series, This Being Human. It's happening here in Toronto. It is going to be, we can imagine, a fascinating conversation expanding on a lot of what we've talked about today. You can get tickets still right now at agakhanmuseum.org. Again, Deeyah, thank you so much for being here. And we'll be back right after this.
Hey there, what did you think? Drop your comments below and join the conversation. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can find more on everything from food and fashion to pop culture and current events. See you soon.